Chapter 87, and Xiaoxue is injured too. Should he continue to focus on mind power, or should he study on the extreme branch? Actually, students who minored in the extreme branch were not uncommon in the mystery branch. However, under most circumstances, the extreme branch abilities of the mystery branch students were used to increase the survival rate on the battlefield. They would not be of much help in the competition for the Longhu list. He might even become mediocre because he took care of many aspects. At this moment, Xiaoxue desperately needed Xiaoxue's guidance. For example, he wanted to know how long he had to train his current mind power before it could become an offensive ability. The mental brick that he used to fracture Li Cheng's nose was not counted. That mental brick was actually a brick that Xiaoxue had condensed from essence. He then brought it along with the power of his fist and smeared it onto Li Cheng's face. It could be considered trickery. However, Xiaoxue had not returned after leaving for 18 days. Did she really head to the intergalactic battlefield? They have classes on Saturday. They did not rest on Saturdays during their 3-month growth phase. After class on Saturday afternoon, Xiaoxue made an appointment to train his reflexes at the building through a small program. He was prepared to train his reflexes for an hour before doing anything else. Originally, the genetic base points that Xiaoxue used to enhance his reflexes the fastest were genetic base points related to reflexes that he activated within a short time. However, activating genetic base points was not the only thing that enhanced an ability in the extreme branch. Activating a genetic base point related to an ability could greatly enhance that ability instantly. It was just like Xiaoxue's reflexes. When he activated a genetic base point, his reflexes speed increased by 68 milliseconds. However, this enhancement was not all he could obtain from activating the genetic base point. Under normal circumstances, an individual would receive an enhancement of 10 points if they activated a single genetic base point. 8 of them would be obtained the moment he activated the genetic base points, while the other 2 could only be obtained after a large amount of training. Thus, activating genetic base points, especially those of the extreme branch, could not be done quickly. After activating a certain genetic base point, it was best to activate the next genetic base point after a certain period of training, when all of the potential in the current genetic base point had been extracted and enhanced. That was an important point that was highlighted in the textbooks of the Wuxia Genetic Evolution College. Thus, Xiaoxue did not continue to activate his genetic base points after Friday's reflexes lesson. Instead, he continued with his training. He planned to activate the next genetic base point after he pushed the potential of this genetic base point to its limits. Xiaoxue trained his reflexes for another hour at the building on Friday night. The final result was 107 milliseconds. His reaction speed had increased by 5 milliseconds. On Saturday morning, Xiaoxue went to the building for an hour to train his reflexes. His reflexes reached 102 milliseconds, increasing by another 5 milliseconds. On Saturday night, Xiaoxue went to the building for 1 more hour of training. This time, the enhancement was only 2 milliseconds. The speed of his reflexes reached 100 milliseconds. On Sunday morning, Xiaoxue trained for an hour and a half in the building for his reflexes. The improvement this time was even smaller. It only increased by a millisecond, but the reaction speed reached 99 milliseconds. It looks like the potential of this reaction-type genetic base point has been largely enhanced by me. I can activate the next reaction-type genetic base point. In a private resting room in the reflex training building, Xiaoxue consumed 2 bottles of level E energy restoration elixirs consecutively within an hour. He immediately activated the second genetic base point in his spine that he had recorded regarding the speed of his reflexes. The speed of Xiaoxue's reflexes increased drastically once again. It went from 99 milliseconds to 60 milliseconds. After persisting in the training for another 45 minutes, Xiaoxue's reaction speed became 54 milliseconds. Xiaoxue, who was a little tired, left the building. He was elated. At this rate, his reaction speed would reach 10 milliseconds. After he activated 1 or 2 more reaction-type genetic base points, the 10 millisecond reaction time was a major milestone. Among genetic newcomers, having a reaction speed of 10 milliseconds would greatly enhance a genetic newcomer's battle reflexes and survival rate. However, once it reached the threshold of 10 milliseconds, not only would the difficulty of increasing it become much greater, but the extent of the increase would also become much smaller. Most people would switch to another direction of training after they reached this level. According to Professor Luo Shifeng's previous request, he had to increase the speed of his reflexes to 10 milliseconds within a year. Zhu Tui felt that it would take less than a year. He would be able to accomplish that in half a month. It was only after he left the building that Zhu Tui realized that there were several unread messages on the communication device that he had switched to Do Not Disturb mode. More importantly, 3 of them belonged to Xiaoxue. Why didn't you come to the Genetic Research Institute today? What are you doing? Come to the Genetic Research Institute immediately if you see this. I hate it when people go missing on me. Sensing the dissatisfaction in Xiaoxue's message, Zhu Tui immediately replied to her. Miss Anne, I was training my reflexes in the building just now and switched to Do Not Disturb mode. I saw it just now. My plan is to head to the Research Institute at 10 a.m. I can finish everything in 2 hours. I'm on my way there now. Zhu Tui had a strong desire to live. There's a group called Star Indicator Friends, a group called Special Importance, and a group called All Access Special Contacts. Do you need me to teach you? Miss Anne, I've remembered that. Soon, you will be the first person of my 3 kinds of settings, Zhu Tui quickly said. Zhu Tui sprinted toward the Genetic Research Institute as fast as he could. It only took 4 minutes. 4 minutes later, Zhu Tui swiped his card and entered Research Institute number 14. His expression changed the moment he entered. The stench of blood. The tunnel of Institute 14 was filled with the thick stench of blood. There was an extremely powerful ventilation system in Research Institute number 14. Unless it had just appeared, the stench of blood would not linger for long. Someone invaded and fought? That was Zhu Tui's first reaction. However, he soon shook his head. That was impossible. This was the capital, as well as the headquarters of the Genetic Research Institute. It would be strange if someone could invade them. Zhu Tui sniffed the air and quickly stepped into the functional room of Institute 14, Room 5. The door to this room was open. The situation in the room shocked Zhu Tui. The stench of blood was even stronger. There were also bloodstains on the ground. And Xiaoxue was sitting in front of a machine. Her face, which was not covered by a mask, was devoid of color. There was a bloodstained jacket on the ground. Those were the clothes that Xiaoxue always wore. Miss Anne was injured.